All right, Mr. Chair, you're recording.
All right, this meeting is in session, and Madam Clerk, can we take a roll for today?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. McKenna.
Here.
Ms. Pallison.
Here on the phone?
Ms. Wint-Pearson. Here. I understand Mr. Goodstein is excused. You have a quorum.
All right, very good. Do we have any additions or edits or anything like that to the agenda? What's the timing of people coming in here?
2 o'clock for Mr. Thompson and 3 o'clock for Mr. DePay.
Okay, and are they indicating on the agenda as time certain?
No.
Okay, do we just want to do that?
Okay. So it would be Mr. Thompson first, 2 o'clock. Mr. DePay at 3.
2 o'clock. Perfect. Anything else?
Jennifer, I'm having trouble hearing. I don't know if it's possible to move the speaker a little or move it when someone's speaking. I know it's annoying. I apologize.
Well, Aisha, too, I was speaking to my folks down.
Yeah, if everyone wouldn't mind trying to raise their voice a bit when they're talking, I think that will help.
Although I found the remote telephone masking.
Yeah, Aisha, everyone has masks on too, so that, makes it a little hard.
I know.
I don't think it will stretch
bad.
over there.
Being there, you don't want me there though because I have a cough and I'm testing pending, so you don't want me there anyway. So
No.
Well, we hope you're okay.
I think I've taken like 2 negative at-home tests. I just don't trust them, and I continue coughing. And I feel like coughing in public is just not something you want to be doing right now.
We appreciate that.
Thank you, Aisha.
So should we just maybe approve the agenda with the understanding that we'll take up the time certain ones when they come?
Yes.
I'll move to approve the agenda now. Second?
Can I make one personal note?
Yes.
The telephonic boards and commissions ordinance was introduced last night and should be taken up on the 28th, so 2 weeks. And I look forward to it. There's so far overwhelming support for it from both the assembly and the administration, because I think Teams is so much easier to share documents. Like right now, today, we have no ability to share documents. So I look forward to that. But overwhelming support. Go back to Teams.
Second for the approval of the agenda?
Oh, second.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no.
I
Okay, very good. Agenda passes. Take a look at minutes from the previous meeting, please. Take a look at the minutes.
No minutes, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, was that?
No minutes this time. You'll have two.
Oh, no minutes,
You'll
no
have
minutes.
2
What was I
sets
looking at
next
here?
meeting.
I got something from the 18th. What was that? Is that just the agenda or is that? Oh, I see. It's the agenda from the 18th and then minutes from the 21st of July, which we've approved already, right? Yeah. Okay, very good. Okay, let's move on then. So let's take a look at the consent agenda. Does anyone need a minute to review the stuff that's on? Yeah, okay, let's take a minute to review what's on the consent agenda. And if anyone sees anything that you want to pull out from the consent agenda, please just make a note of that. Have we done with Mr. Julius before?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm trying to think of what happened last time.
Lisa's death.
Oh, gosh, my brain is downloaded. I remember nothing. I could probably run and grab something. I know.
No, my last time, the school district was concerned because he was selling athletic gear from Dooley's to the team.
I feel like this even goes back to my last tour.
Yeah.
It does.
I feel like there's been
It's
several.
like the third time.
You and I didn't really overlap, so he must have come back multiple times.
He does, he comes back like every year with
Oh, to see the
something.
revive approval, like.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, there's no, it's okay from Mr. Whiting.
Also don't know exactly what.
Yeah, I don't think we have enough information.
He's got two in there, right?
He does. Wait, hold on.
They're back here. That's right.
What is the disclosure of economic interest in a contract? What is a notice of intent to respond to a public solicitation?
All right, so we've got the two dualies that I take that people want to pull out from the consent agenda. Are people okay with the bishop one? Anyone know, does Dean and Bishop really have no influence on what telecommunication services the school district?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've seen that they have a procure thing, so I'm not sure I wrong them off. I feel like I would have appreciated more details about how they have, well, because she is like ultimately the decision maker on all things, right?
Right, right.
But it's reasonable that her husband would continue their bid for, husband's business would continue to bid for, KMC services. So I'm sure they have, I would suspect they have a system in place, but it's not reflected in the document. So I wonder if we might ask more for more information about how they have created that separation before signing off. We never asked for that before, because that
Yes.
comes up every single year.
Yeah, we have looked at this before, and I believe the answer was something to do with the school board is the one that authorizes contracts or something, so, but it at least merits another call for us to remind ourselves what it is.
And it's probably the same exact answer for Dooley, right? Because that, if he comes up every single year, it doesn't sound like he has,
I
his
remember
business
having-
hasn't changed.
I remember having more concerns about his. The last couple
Yeah.
times we talked
I don't
about
know.
it.
I mean, the school district itself was not particularly pleased with Mr. Dooley, so.
Oh, yeah, you might remember, I think the last time he came to us and he wanted us to say it was consistent with the ethics code, even though the school district had already said you can't do this.
Oh, yeah, I
So he
remember
wanted us
that.
to go, he was hoping for us to kind of go over their head, and they were kind of chewed about it.
Then I think last year he came back for another disclosure type of thing, and I can't remember. I know we eventually approved it, but for some reason, I think there might have been a phone call involved in that too.
And then is he the one that likes to get the yearly waiver for it, so he's not paying $15 every
Yes.
single time? I think that was the other thing, that's why he keeps coming up, is one of the things he asks for is that yearly waiver.
So maybe we pull the bishop one as well as the two dualies to get more information, and then otherwise
Yeah.
all right.
Okay, so do we have, I think a motion to approve the consent agenda accepting, with the exception of the 2 dualies and the bishop.
Yes.
Is there a second for that?
Do we have 2 duties? Oh, we do. Yeah, sorry, we have motion, yeah, I second that motion.
Any more discussion? All right, all those in favor is the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? All right, consent agenda passes with the exception of those 3 items which have been pulled for further information. All right, very good. So let's take, yes, please.
And so, the steps for obtaining that further information. I guess I would volunteer to write Dina something, and to also ask David Whiting, because again, I think it was a school board thing. If people would like to get that initial information, and then whether you would continue with Lily. Yeah. You would roll over when he hears your name.
Dee, that would be great.
Okay, would that be?
That's great. All right, very good. So let's take a look at ethics complaint. It's ethics complaint. We don't have that one, right? Is that, Jennifer, is that right? Is that?
Yeah, we need to move to, we need to make a motion to move item 6A to the October agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, so 2021-5, we'll take that up at our next regular meeting. Let's take a look at advisory opinion 2021-6 confidential. And Madam Clerk, we better move into, I suppose, deliberative session for this one?
Yes.
Do we want to move into deliberative for both 2021-6 and 2021-7?
I think so. Can we make a motion for the, all right, so why don't we make it official? We have a motion, we can do
I'll move to
deliberative session for those 2 then.
I'll move to go into
6 and 7.
deliberative session for request for advisory opinion 2021-6 and -7.
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, let's move into, Madam Clerk, let's move into deliberative session.
Recording in open session.
All right, we've reached one of our time certain items, so we're going to be hearing from, do you know where you're hearing from?
Yeah. And Chair, if I could just start off with a little
Sure.
what the process is.
How's it going?
Hello.
Hi. You might want to sit closer to this chair. It's actually for the person on the phone, but that works.
Oh, okay.
Make it comfortable.
Well, thank you for coming, Mr. Counselor.
Sure.
I'm Terry Kelly, I'm Chair of the Board of Ethics.
Okay.
This is,
I actually went through something met years ago, actually, building the show last time around, I was getting some legal work for the home builder.
Oh, okay, yeah, I think, yeah, look familiar.
I'm Jack McKay.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Lisa Toussaint. I'm normally the administrative hearing officer, but one of those other duties as assigned is that I also lead the
Yeah, there you
ethics
go.
board.
No problem.
And there's a person on the phone. Aisha?
Hi, this is Aisha Pallison.
We have 4 and 5 board members.
Okay.
One of them is off, so I just haven't been used. We won't see him for months and years.
Yeah, exactly.
And Mr. Chair, if I could.
Please, yeah, you want this?
This is one where, as you know, the clerk's office, the ombudsman, or the municipal attorney can file a request for advisory opinion. We've done it on numerous occasions. Oftentimes, I do it on behalf of someone. So, for instance, with another appointee, Christina Hendrickson, the real estate person, I filed it on her behalf. That just makes everything cumbersome. So, in this one, and then the next one, which, by the way, is Mr. Zapay, also a new appointee. I just filed it because the city needs to be proactive in conflict cases. Let's figure it out up front. So, I have filed it. It's non-confidential. If you were to file it, it could be confidential. But this is a matter of public importance. There's not going to be defamatory, or if it ever got to that point, then we would do something, whether it's deliberative session or whatever. But that's not the intent here. We've done this for many directors, including, for instance, Michelle McNulty, because she came from Dow. So this is actually a fairly common exercise. The only difference here is I said, no, we just need to do this. Same for Mr. Zepay. There was a rumblings that the assembly might hold his confirmation until he went through the ethics board. Christina was doing it concurrently, so it's just, let's just get it on the table. So we're not doing this in confidential session, and again, because it's plain facts. It's not you're a good or bad person. It's just, do you have any conflicts? So I wanted to bring that up to the group. We're not in deliberative at this point, and we can debate whether we should be in deliberative at the end of it. Usually we get a bunch of facts and then we go off and be quiet. So you had provided, I asked you to provide, I really appreciate you did it. You provided, and I hope it's in your, I know it was at the end of the ethics thing.
I thought it was very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, sure.
Otherwise, we sit here and ask you these questions for the first
Yeah.
40 minutes. And so if people hopefully have had an opportunity to read that. But the thing I thought would be helpful for all of us is it's very difficult to understand conflicts with your role when we don't understand your role in relationship to other parts of Elmore. I call it the Elmore boards, all the land use boards and building boards and safety boards. I occasionally walk over there for 5 minutes every 3 years. But so I wondered, Ron, so and it's okay to call you Ron.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I wondered, I was trying to get a sense of where you fit, and I realized the new administration hasn't finalized an org chart, or at least that's my understanding. They wait till the end for me to say, absolutely not.
Well, I think they have, but yet it's, yeah.
Okay, but between what you said, and people might draw this out for themselves, and after the 28th, hopefully we'll be on Teams and we can do this and share it, so this is a little bit more difficult. But you are, did you refer to yourself as the Building Services Director? Is that what you are?
That's what they hired and put as my title, yes.
So is that what you are then?
Well, there's no building services department. So in the reorg, we just put the final document together that basically calls, so Adam Trombley is going to be the Office of Economic Development.
Okay.
Below Adam, it becomes Community Development Admin instead of Public Works Admin. So some naming convention, but similar departments. Then there's Public Works, which is traffic, PM&E, and M&O, maintenance operations. So this standard, normal public works type of configuration. Then what we were calling is development services is what the naming is going to change. So development services has normally been the building safety area, but what we're going to do is call it development services, which I will head. Then there'll be building safety and planning below that. So Bob Dole and Michelle McNulty will be below that. Then we will be creating, moving over the GIS function, and then real estate services, which will include Heritage Land Bank and real estate.
And that will be under you?
No, those are all under Adam.
So under you is what?
Will be building safety, which is the old development services, by naming only, name change only, and then planning department
Okay. And then over you is Adam?
is Adam.
Okay. And do people mind if I keep asking some organizational questions?
I'm sorry, just so that I understand, our building safety and planning department, those are like two separate boxes underneath you?
Right now, that would be development services and planning. And just as a name change, development, because building services doesn't seem to encompass planning, it doesn't sound like, but development services does. So we're just kind of revising the naming convention, really, of development services will just be building safety and planning.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Thanks.
And who and where is building official? Building safety official?
Building official is Bob Dole,
And where-
which is right under me, which will be head of building safety.
Okay, so that.
The old development services director / building official becomes the building safety / building official. It's kind of better naming conventions for what is kind of done nationally, and people understand that one.
And I don't know if people had more questions about that. Well, let me ask you this. So plan review, we keep hearing about plan reviewing and permitting, is that?
That's under Bob Dole as building official,
So he.
which is underneath me.
Right.
Yeah.
So he does permits and, what did it say, land?
It's right away,
Right-of-way.
building safety, code enforcement, and all of the building permitting functions.
Okay. All right, so everybody caught that, so there's
Yeah.
3 more down the list, okay.
So Office of Economic Development is Adam.
It's no longer economic and community development. They took that piece out, and it'll be the Office of Community Development.
Office of Community Development. And then you're directly underneath Adam.
Correct.
And your position, we're not totally sure right now, is it building services?
It's called Building Services Director,
Building
but it'll
Services.
be probably, when we rename everything, it'll be Development Services Director
Got
is
it.
what will be. And then Bob's will be changed from Development Services Director to be Building Safety / Building Official.
Got it.
Most of the makeup is just naming to make it align correctly and make it sound like what it is and what it really functions as.
To me, it's just all those offices over and over.
Yeah.
Call yourself anything you want.
Yeah.
Okay, so if it's okay with the board, I want a quick ask. Let's go focus to scope, because that's the obvious concern. And scope, you said, is daughter and son owned at this point.
At this point, I've exited the company, correct?
And you gave your interest to kids.
Yes.
Okay, they're adult children, they don't live with you.
They're 29, 27, and no, they do not live with me.
Congratulations on that. Okay, and then their business scope is primarily a permitting?
Permitting expediting company, basically, yeah.
And-
It used to be an engineering / permit expediting company, but when you're an engineer, you can't have engineering in the name anymore when the engineer is no longer with the business, so they had to change the name, we had to exit out, and therefore, all of the engineering function that they did is no longer there.
And what's the menu of permitting that they help with? That's great.
Well, they help with all aspects of building.
So only municipal permitting, not like state?
No, they do state permitting. They do state. They do state Alaska Fire Marshals. They do Fairbanks. They do Wasilla. They do wherever any company that needs them. Or, I mean, when I was there, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to keep all those ties and all those connections that we both developed. I would assume that yes, they would, and I would assume that because of the service is a pretty good service at helping people expedite permits and just basically get them through the permit system, they'll continue doing that throughout all of Alaska.
Okay, and then so within Anchorage specifically, they do all manner of permits. They do, everything from building to like a plat kind of work, or do they do planning? Do they just do building permits, or?
They probably handle building permits. We did arrange plats, but the company arranged like another third party to do those plats. All they did was work with a
You
client.
mean like a surveyor, so it's not.
Yeah, they'd hire a surveyor, or they'd hire a company to do the plat completely and just be the kind of go-between.
Okay.
And they still do that, right?
I believe that they would continue doing that, yeah.
Where would inspection fall under? Right, 'cause
Inspection.
aren't there different?
Inspection's
is that
under
code
building
enforcement?
safety.
Okay, all right.
Inspection falls under Bob Dole's, which is below Bob Dole, below me, in building safety. So all the inspections after a person gets a permit, contractors usually schedule all the inspections.
And I've heard through the grapevine, I don't see it in your narrative, that scope processes a big percentage of the permits in municipal.
I mean, I don't know what the percentage is. I mean, there's big permits and there's small permits. I mean, there's a huge amount of If you include every single re-roof permit, every retro, all that is probably, I would say scope's probably down to 10-20%. If you include all the main building permits, I don't know, it goes up from there, but it all just depends on what you're looking at and what you're deciding to do and what what they'll continue doing and continue needing.
Okay, so I'm sure there's no way to actually quantify that because there are different types of permits. But again, it's been relayed that the scope is is really a very big player in this market. And maybe that is from yours where you said that scope has put forward more from all local contractors, architects, and engineers.
Oh, Cora, I mean, I was building official for 10, 12 years before this, public works director. I dealt with everybody. When they found out me on the outside, they called me. I helped them get permits. I knew how to get through the system. I trained my daughter how to get through the system. I probably personally hadn't been getting permits in the building department for 3 to 4 years anyway, after she was trained up to do all of that. But I knew who to go to. I mean, when you work over there, 90% of the policies, 80% of the policies still have my name on it after I hadn't been building official for a decade, but yet they were created because they helped the city out, they helped everybody out, and so, even on the outside, I mean, people would ask, well, how's your name on every policy that we deal with? I always told the administration then, it's like, you should take my name off stuff, but they never did. But at the end of the day, now I'm back over there. But as the policies get revised now, I don't sign them. Bob Dole does as building official, because he has the official building official title, which is where most of the authority for doing all that lies. But obviously works for me. So, I mean, that's why I called you, Dee, was to make sure that people understood. It's like, the point is, yeah, I'm over top of it, but I really don't make day-to-day decisions with regard to any of it. Like, I think I said in the letter, I have yet in almost 3 months now to make one technical decision, because that's what staff does, that's what Bob does. I don't see, I see my role as streamlining the processes, right? It's really trying to get, and that's part of this reorg, was bringing all of permitting, every function of permitting in under one person. So as the industry always requested, they wanted to be able to go to one person if they have a permitting problem. And so, and then streamline it. So that means assembling codes, assembling changes, trying to fix things that help streamline and make it easier. And so I listen to everybody, but at the same time, I've worked for everybody. I mean, there's very few people in this town that I haven't worked for, both, I mean, on the outside since I had left the city. So I knew what I was getting into coming in here. I know what I do, which is I change things for everybody. It's never individually done, because that's kind of the code is, for the most part, pretty black and white. I mean, there's some gray areas here and there, but for the most part, it's just the code is the code, and we administer the code, and we try not to vary from that. I felt very strongly for the 10, 12, 15 years that I did it before. I did that, and then on the outside, I would suggest things all the time because I felt like I knew most. And then now there were things that I felt I could really streamline when I was finally asked to come back, and I evaluated it heavily because obviously when you have a company and you have your kids and you are the engineering based in that company, and I'm the face of that company there for a while to get it started, until Kaylee, now everybody calls her instead of called me at the end anyway. But it built a pretty large following. It built a big group of customers, which is, I mean, most architects, most engineers, most contractors in Anchorage. But most of them all suggested, man, you're crazy to go back. You just basically took 70% of your business right away from your kids, and then you go back to the city, and why? You were doing such a good thing for them. But I feel strongly that streamlining permitting for everybody is good for for Anchorage, good for the development, and good for moving forward. I don't feel there's a conflict. I called you and kind of explained that. I tried to put as best as I could on paper of what I do, what my role is. I think a lot of people don't understand my role yet because it hasn't been really rolled out outside of this room. What I told you was pretty much not really rolled out to the public right now, right? But we are. It's okay for us to be telling people, from what I understand. That's what's in the budget. That's what we turned in for the budget to do this kind of setup. So we've tried to do everything right, which is just streamlining permitting, working with folks, and trying to make the best decisions for the city. And that's what I feel like I'm doing. I don't feel like there's a conflict. I don't feel like I have to answer. I mean, whether it's the contractors or even my kids, I just don't feel like I'm in that role. In my present position is really a day-to-day evaluation of permitting in general. And so that's what I see it now. I mean, I don't see it changing. That's what we're putting through as an org chart. And so I believe that's where we still are. I'd be the first one to say if it was organized differently and they needed me down to be the building official, and that's trying to deal with permits with my kids every day, that's a little bit questionable, and I would say that I probably would have never taken the job. I mean, that's probably where I would have been, but I feel like the role that I've been asked to do and streamlining and fixing it is fixing it for everyone regardless, and there's no financial interest I have with anybody, and I feel it's the progression of where I was before. It just, in this case, I owned a company. I had to do something on the outside for a while between jobs. And at the time that I was released from duties back in 15, I mean, I had 2 kids in college. I had to know and keep them in. And so we started the business, and it actually grew in a pretty good manner. And
Okay, can I ask you a few other questions, and anybody else feel free to jump in. So back to permitting. Let's say it's any permit, if that permit is not granted or disputed, what happened? I realize there's lots of what ifs there, but basically, how are disputed permits handled? Do they go up the chain, or how are they handled?
well, right now they would go through, disputed permits. There's so many different options for permits to be questioned or have comments. Plan reviewers make comments. If the plan reviewer can't come to connection, it goes to Bob Dole. If it goes to Bob Dole and they still don't like the answer, they go to the building board. And at the building board level, then they can either get a resolution or they go to Superior Court. So the process goes through Bob Dole, not through my position.
Okay.
So I don't know if you were going to say something.
No, I have other questions, but if you're done, or anyway.
Oh, no, please.
So I have a question about I understand that the concept is, and then with all of the permitting functions under you, that again, that people can go to you if they have an issue. But that seems to run counter to what you're saying, in that you're saying like you're not directly involved in any kind of decisions about permitting. Like, how are those two reconciled? Because
They would call and ask me, if they call and ask me. We've got a few calls that people have asked me in the last month and a half that they go. Then I just go to Bob or Michelle, depending on what it is, and I just pass that on down to them. It's just making sure then that they get an answer, and that the answer is followed with regard to the code sections that are out there available. That's what's been happening for 3 months. That's why I say I haven't made a decision. Somebody might call me on a permit, and I'll say, hey, Bob, can you go take a look at this and let me know what happens?
The distinction is you're not making the decision, but you would still be fielding and funneling the request to the departments that work for you.
Correct.
Okay. And that includes I've been peeking at your children's website, and the website says that they handle 70% of the permits within the municipality. So 70% of the permits, like realistically speaking, you're going to get a request from them on behalf of a client at some point to say, to a question about a permit, and then you would direct that to Bob or to Michelle to resolve.
They know to go to Bob.
Okay.
They don't contact me on the permits. We've tried to set that up. there were several projects like I had designed prior to me coming to the city. So we sat down, discussed how the best way to handle the interaction between those. They go directly to Bob. They don't ask me about any of them. But their issues aren't really the issues that you're talking. I mean, technical issues are different than just, oh, is this permit is it approved yet, or has it got through the system? Has it been sitting at 3 weeks or 2 weeks, or I don't know where they got that 70%. I think Ross at the building department said they think that we were doing that much. I had heard that back in April time frame or May when I first got the call from Mayor Bronson, or Mayor-elect Bronson at the time. There was somebody that placed some email on his site when he was considering me or whatever, and it said that, well, how could anybody that's in charge of 70% of all permitting be doing? I don't know what that number is. I don't even know how you could truly calculate that number. And then
Whatever it is, it's a big slice, right? I mean, it's a big slice of the permits that are coming through.
Yeah.
Of some sort, right? Yeah.
a big slice if you look at just certain types of permits. But in overall, I mean, the building department handles 30,000 permits a year. I guarantee we didn't handle 21,000 permits a year. It was, more in the 1,000 to, kind of range. And so it's probably exaggerated both on that website and from the city. It just seems like they are probably doing a lot because they're in there a lot. But I mean, 90% of homeowners don't ask Scope to do permitting. They do it themselves. Most right-of-way permits do it themselves. Most roofing permits do it themselves. So it might be, the 60% of the large projects or something, but it's somewhat well exaggerated above the reality number, and I don't know how we could come
No,
up
that's
with.
fair. I think I was just getting at, it's, I would say, more likely than not, those who are permitting complicated projects are probably the ones who want to reach out to you with questions. I imagine as the person who's trying to think that we're the
Used
person
to-
builders who are like, my development's being held up, the winter's coming, and what the heck is going on?
Most of the time when they reached out to me before and just going on, they were running into a problem.
Oh, yeah.
And then we would solve the problem, and they were like, wow, you solved that problem so quickly and so fast, or you knew the answer without even going to the city, that they then said, well, geez, we're just going to bring all our stuff to you and go through it. I mean, at the city, realistically, some of the streamlining that we do might put them more out of business than it would keep them in business. Mm-hmm. And that's too bad, but my view is they'll have to adapt and do other things or whatever that happens. I mean, they're grown, they're very smart, they're both college educated, so I think that they will build their expertise in their areas, and they'll be used for their areas. And I didn't tell them very often what to do when I was at my own company because they figured it out. So I can't imagine dealing with it much now inside, but I think it's a valid concern, and I think it was worth talking about, trying to explain what's going on and hear what others thought, because I don't want to go in front of a public acceptance body and have this question out there. I want to be able to be honest and open, and that's how I've always been. That's why I felt like I worked at the city for so many years through so many different mayors. And this is just another assignment, kind of expanding on what I started to try to get it to finish it. And whether I'll be there 1 year, 3 years, I don't know, but I feel like I make the right decision. And this is a tough one because I think some of it you have to just, trust your past behavior, trust your future behavior, because anybody can say anything about what this kind of case is and Ron's there, so he's going to make all these decisions. But I'm really there to streamline the process and the overall thing. And I think it's been working pretty well with Bob and Michelle answering those questions.
Okay, so you said in the past you would solve the problem, various types of problems, but now if there's a problem permit, who does that go to? let's just say it's roof, or pick any kind you want, roof.
I don't even see them unless somebody has called me, and I mean, my phone hardly rings. I mean, realistically, they've called Adam a few times, Adam Tromley, my boss, and he said, hey, could you go find out what's going on this? And so, for instance, one yesterday before he went out of town, he gave me, it was a person wanting to find out whether or not, why they couldn't build a building or a triplex on a lot that's R2. I told him I'd let Michelle answer it. Michelle got the answer, emailed him, and handled the question. I mean, I just see that it's like facilitating, getting it, dishing, if anything, it's just dishing it off to the people that can solve it, and then make sure that it's not like just forgotten and it's just left there. It's like the decision is all, I believe, in the authority of the planning director and the building official, which are below, and they make any technical calls, any issue with regard to that. And really, I'm just trying to facilitate, and I know who it goes to, and I know the answers. And then, last Friday we're getting a new website out, so I went out to BOMA to kind of tell them, hey, here's this new information that's out there that is very good for all types of builders, contractors. So I feel like it's more kind of like building this reputation up to say development is acceptable. We're willing to help, and staff's willing to help you get these things going. So,
Can I ask, if Michelle or Bob had an issue with a permit that they were released from, if it were a complex permit and they wanted to get some input from someone with expertise on it, would they normally come to you to get that, or you wouldn't talk to them about it, or would you? I'm just wondering.
I mean,
people come to their
technically, they're as technically savvy as I am. So, I mean, I don't. There's not been one time in 3 months that they've technically come and said, "Hey, Ron, we don't know how to handle this."
Okay.
They've been handling it. They've been the director. They've been the building official, and they've been the planning director for the last 3 years, both of them at least. So, they wouldn't be in those positions if they weren't technically able to handle that. So I don't see them come. I mean, really, I don't. They haven't come to me yet because I think that they know more, especially in Michelle's case, knows more than me. But Bob is very savvy in what he's doing and very solid too. I mean, if he didn't have to deal with some mass care stuff, he'd be really taking and going to town on building side things. But that'll clear up here in the next month or so.
I think I am kind of getting my head around the most. I think it's partially informed by the fact that I used to represent people who I know we reached out to you in your last role for your help because you had a strong and justified reputation as being someone who would help move development along and assist people who are doing development to cut through red tape and get the work done that they needed to get done, right? And so I know the people who I worked with then would call you because they felt like you personally, of all other people, both because of your role but also because of who you are, would be able to help them get something done. And so I assumed when you took this role that was a part and parcel of it, but then again, those same developers who are trying to get through permitting would be able to reach out to you and look to you for that role. And I think the challenge I'm trying to figure out is what's the rub where those people are potentially also clients of your children's business. What happens then? Do you, if somebody reaches out to you in that context who is also their client, do you take that call? Do you refer that call immediately? Say, I can't take that call because you're also doing business through my children. Like, how do you handle that for people?
Well, I mean, in the technical aspect, if they call me, I help find them an answer, but there is no decisions at that point. It's just kind of guiding them where they need to go, and then they make the decisions and do a permit. I could probably assume that anybody that's calling me may or may not have that permit go through them, and they may not even know it's going to go through them, right? Because it might be the contractor that I might be talking to the architect. The architect ends up hiring a contract. That contractor hires. Some of it we won't even know at that point in the project. When I at the level that they get involved with me, it's typically at the beginning of the the beginning of the project trying to see what can happen. Is there any problems with that? Is there any bigger deals with that? Which is, I would say, probably 99% of the time before they would ever decide if they would, who's going to do their permitting. And so, I mean, I don't know exactly how to answer that, except for the fact that if a person is dealing ahead of it trying to find technical answers, and if they call me, I'm going to answer those technical answers or get them the person that can and move on.
Can I ask you a question about that? So when you're saying technical answers, Becky's question to you was people would call and ask a question, and you said you help them out to understand the process, right? So it's like, I'm not familiar with the process myself. Is it the kind of thing where you're having to think through and think creatively and give them one of many options for what the process could be, or is it really just a simple, like, you're going to definitely be under this subsection or this process or this rule? The question I'm getting, really what I'm trying to get to is there judgment in answering the question, or is it just knowledge based on the code?
I mean, it's so different at so many different points of, early on at the pre-application stage, the predetermination stage, the pre-project stage in some cases, just to make sure what's going to happen, who is my reviewer going to be, is there, do we have fire access problems, do we have, I mean, it's just facilitating, trying to get the right person to give them the right answer so they don't go down the road with bad information and then submit for a permit and then get a comment that's contrary to that. So it's trying to ensure that we have a system that gets the right person to answer the right question, right? Sometimes, because of my background, I might know that answer, but sometimes I might not. But a lot of times, like today, I knew the answer, but I still went to Michelle and said, hey, you need to confirm and get this answer to this guy. What is the answer, by the way? And it matched. It's just so many different, development is, and that's why not that many people can do it, right? It's very, very complex. A lot of your clients have always dealt with different ways, and that's why, some people like what's going on, some people don't. There's always this, well, you need to do less, you need to do more, all these things. And you got to weigh all those aspects, and then you got to weigh the risk to the city, and you got to weigh the direction. Really, what we wanted to do with this organization is try to streamline that process to where you can get an answer, and you'll get an answer, and it won't always be just no, you go search for an answer. It's like there's enough knowledge base in that building that we're trying to encourage. It's like, hey, you've reviewed 20 of these type of projects. Can you facilitate some better answers to this guy because you've seen it 3, 4, or 5 different ways? And that's kind of so it's like, obviously people are going to call me. They're going to want that expertise that now the old company I was in doesn't have that expertise, right? They don't have that knowledge base at all with regard to technical answers. They know how to process the permit at the end of it, but they don't have the engineering base, the basis for all this technical stuff. So I don't feel like we're competing at all. The person now they called me before. Then when I was on the outside, they called me because I could tell them then. And now I'm back in, so they're going to call me here. I don't really feel like it's the same thing, or it's like, oh, I'm going to give you an answer here, go run over there and ask them, they know the answer. It's all has to be within, and nobody they basically dropped from being that to a different type of company now. And yeah, they process permits, and they process a lot of permits, but that's just permit expediting. And there's companies all over the world that need that help in little local towns, and they get that without the technical expertise, right? And so it's tough to explain. I'm hoping I'm trying to answer the question correctly, or not correctly, but honestly, and the way I see it.
So the bottom line then, at least on one angle, is in your position, you do not, as your role, or anticipate taking any official actions that would affect whether the permits that are being shepherded through by your kid's company would be affected.
So
So you don't anticipate taking any official action?
On an individual project basis.
Yeah, on any permit that they're putting through, any work that they're putting through, that would affect the permit?
They probably handled hundreds of permits in the last.
You're saying your role is outside of that?
I believe my role is outside of that because I haven't, for 3 months, they probably handled hundreds of permits by now, and I've never seen one or dealt with one. We've kind of set it up for, the building official handles that. What I'd be looking for, I'm looking for streamlining the whole dang operation to make it better for everybody. And so we've made it pretty clear, that they go to Bob. If Bob's not there, they go to Adam. Adam's made several outside of me we try to, I understand that the possibility of how it could look, so we're never going there. We've tried to set up processes to where if Kaylee or Tyler have an issue, they don't call me. They call Bob, and if Bob's not there, they'll call Ross. If Ross is not there, they call Adam. They go above. And that's kind of how things have been set up because I don't need to, because the issues that they need resolved are typically easy to resolve, but they sometimes need a supervisor. So I just wouldn't be that supervisor on those.
That's great, and I think that's the way you'll have to kind of do it.
Yeah.
You don't own the company. The fact that your children do by code definition, you do have an interest then in that company. So the code will talk about interests that you or an immediate family member, and that includes your children. Even though they're older and they're not in the household anymore, they do count by code as immediate family members. And so the code will, as it applies to you, I don't want to say it's as if you still own the company, because it's certainly better that you don't.
Yeah.
But the fact that you don't is not, does not get you, I don't want to say it does not get you out of jail, but it kind of does not make the problem go away as far as the code is concerned. So I think that the system that you're talking about is the way it is a good system. It's going to have to go, that you're going to have to be firewalled out so that you're never placed in a position where you touch one of their matters in a way that could influence its outcome.
Right. Yeah. We're aligned on that process totally. I believe that that's how we've tried to set it up, and that's how it's worked for the first 3 months, and feel like it is how it should be. I don't disagree with you. I didn't exit the company just trying to disappear and that takes a lot of work to do what we did and to do what I did and
you'd be surprised. We've had people do that kind of very simple
and think that that's all good.
They were still absolutely hands-on, and it was a name only that they had left the company. A massive
I
think you're doing that, but I'm just saying. I appreciate that you left the company. I know you made a very personal sacrifice to do so.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to kind of not warn, but highlight that the way the code works, you will still be interpreted to have an interest in that company, even though you don't have an ownership interest anymore, because you have an immediate family member who does.
Yeah.
And that there's still the nepotism concern, right? That you have an interest because you want your kids to do well.
Yeah, it's no different. We have 2 planners that have wives that work for companies that deal with us all the time. They just don't do their projects. So, we know all of that type of scenario. Everybody there knows that I had this company. They know the kids. They all respect that, and my staff knows that. They know me. Who knows? If somebody had that doubt, I think that doubt has been cleared by now because of the 3 months, just seeing that, wow, we thought maybe he'd jump into those or whatever. I wouldn't have gone here unless I felt like I could separate 100% and felt like what they do and what I'm going to do really don't apply, and there's no decision making that I really need to do at all, period, with what they do. And so therefore it's very easy to separate and give them 3 alternatives, which is building official, or first it's probably Ross, which is the plan review lead, then building official, then Adam. So it bypasses me on all manner. And so then the odds of those 3 being gone, whoever would be acting in any of those places except Adam, because I always act for Adam, they wouldn't have the opportunity to come to me when Adam's gone, but they would have the opportunity, whoever's acting for Ross and whoever's acting for Bob, to continue that path. And all I can say is I know I won't do that, but I understand 100% of what you're saying, and I thought of all of that aspect to what I do, and I would have not taken this job if I felt I couldn't, and if I ever feel like I can't anymore because of the makeup, I would resign immediately. That's just how, that's who I am. I think anybody that deals with me knows that that's how I'd be.
Could you talk a little bit about, so the people who would be making these decisions then would be, I take it, Bob Dole and some
Michelle and Duncan.
So the other concern that might arise is sort of the appearance that they answer to you, and so they are influenced by you either directly or indirectly because they're concerned about reprisals or So could you talk a little bit like what in the org chart you're sort of their supervisor? To what degree do they answer to you? I mean, like, what is their job security look like in the sense, like, to what degree do they answer you?
Well, they're they are execs, but they've been execs before. They made these decisions. Both of them are very competent, very strong-minded folks. If I did that on one project, they'd call D in 5 seconds. I have zero doubt, and I would. I mean, that pressure. I know what you're talking about. And my view is it's not in my nature to do that anyway, I don't believe. I've always been strong. I have a loud voice, so I'm vocal about different things. But I've never, ever, in the time before or now, ever told somebody to sign something off if they don't feel comfortable with it. And so my view is that'd be like trying to tell them that in this case. It's like, you need to take care of this for them or whatever. And I don't believe that it just is what it is. If they get contacted, they make their decision, and I think you could talk to both of them, and they would say that in the last 3 months, I don't make them ever feel like they have to make a decision themselves. Most of the codes that have been forwarded, I just said, hey, do you guys code changes? I can help you get them done, because they couldn't get them done with staff, so I'm able to go write those codes, take the time, get it done, which will streamline their work later, but they brought them forward.
It's just that the way it works sometimes, and you know this, right? You know that, right?
Yeah.
The way it works, what happens sometimes is that the supervisor doesn't ask them to sign anything they're uncomfortable, doesn't even try to influence, but the fact that you are their supervisor and their child is bringing work to you can have a significant and negative influence on them, right? I mean, so is there... are these at-will employees? I mean, like, what is their situation?
Executives are not.
There's probably some non-reps though too underneath.
Yeah. I mean, I would just say that I feel like all of them already have situations similar in their departments. They already have people that have family members that are in the business. It's a small town. Families do the same business. Planning has 2 wives that definitely submit entitlement projects in the situation. It is a little bit different in the sense that those are all down below rather than the top down, so it's a little bit different. So I mean, I understand what you're coming from, but it's very similar but yet slightly different. I don't know how else to answer it except for the fact that I feel like I don't pressure them, and I think that I think that they probably could have thought that I might be that way before I came on, but in 3 months of dealing with them on a daily basis, I think they could tell you all that, man, he makes us feel very comfortable in allowing us to do our job and make the decisions and move on. So I mean,
and I get it. I mean, like, I'm not,
No,
and again, in our view, the board has taken the view, in the past that the city is best served when we have experts from
Yeah.
industry sometimes in certain positions like yours, and that there's going to be, you know, some unavoidable tension there
Yeah.
in terms of that stuff, but you can only
Yeah.
make it so airtight,
Yeah.
these sort of like firewalls that we're trying to set up. So I was just kind of curious, sort of like, you know, because you can see probably from the comment that Becky pointed out, it's like there is, you know, part of it's the straight up, is there a conflict of interest? And at least in my view, if you're not making official actions that directly affect that company's work,
Yeah.
you're probably okay. The second one would be the more perception issue, right? That's like a
Yep.
public trust issue. Is the perception so bad? Is the optics of it so bad?
Yep.
Then you just really couldn't say, well, you can't really claim to citizens you're running government with integrity when you've got it set
Yeah.
up.
I think that point is why I'm here, right? I think more so than anything is, and I think Dee would agree that that's kind of what I said, you know, it is what it is. I really enjoy doing this. I want to do it. I wanted to take it on. But if the perception is too big and the issue is too big, I can easily step away because the same people will use me on the outside. I just feel sometimes I can help the city to help everybody rather than just the people that can afford paying for my services. You know, so that's why I also can't say that. I mean, before I was at the city 22 years, right? So, you know, I was wanting to go all the way, get to 30 years and move on. I didn't have that backup on the outside that I knew that I could do. In this case, I know I can do this, and I know I can do it fine, and I know I could go outside and be just fine because I have. So at the end of the day, I mean, I was more trying to make sure that the optics aren't bad for this mayor, because I think that's a big key, and of me being successful as well as him being successful. I felt that we could overcome that, and I didn't feel like the perception is that bad once people realize that I'm not that decision-making body. But at the end of the day, I completely understand, and that's why we're here, right? That's why I reached out to Dee, because I really wanted to make sure that, you know, I can look at it one way and feel like it's just fine, but I also feel like a board like this, and I was really reaching out for Dee's expertise, and she suggested coming here for your expertise. That my view is I want people that know this and know the issues and know everything about it and feel like I'll respect that decision of what they feel, because at the end of the day, I'm good either way. But I really wouldn't have taken this on if I really didn't think I could help. I really thought I could help fix things for development in Anchorage, and I really feel like I have no conflict personally or professionally with the company that I left, which happens to be my
I
kids.
appreciate you coming. I mean, like, you know, and this is what we've done in the past with these kinds of situations, that there's immense value in being proactive
Yeah.
about it and being transparent. Right?
Right.
And that alone can sort of help bulk up trust. You want to say, oh, the situation, you know, looks a little, you know, doesn't look as great as it could be, but you've got an individual who's being proactive about it, who's trying to be transparent about it, who's trying to build firewalls. That is immensely helpful. So thanks.
Actually, I was going to ask, did Aisha have any questions this week?
Oh yeah, Aisha, I'm sorry. You have any questions?
I don't think so. And I'm sorry if this was answered already. Just I guess the straight up question, if you know or don't mind answering, do you know if you have direct hiring and firing authority of the folks we were talking about who would be making these decisions?
Well, we all work for the mayor. So
Okay.
The mayor has the direct hiring and firing authority for all exec positions.
Okay.
But having said that, you have the ear of the mayor probably with respect to your own staff.
I probably do have
Right.
the ear of the mayor, yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Understood.
I don't have other concerns about this.
I think that's all for the moment from me. Thank you very much for coming and taking the time.
Yeah, no problem.
Terry had mentioned, sounds like that the opinion would say, hey, you can't take the official action with respect to scope permitting. I don't know if you're going that far. But the reason I bring that up is, one, I'm not sure you know what official action is in an ethical sense. But when I first talked to you, I said, well, I mean, I just threw it out there, well, and I had only talked for 5-8 minutes, okay, so it wasn't like this. And I said, well, what about if you just don't touch any scope permitting at all? And that was you were very averse to that, like, what? And I wondered if that was because, for instance, you don't know when a contractor A may later on become associated with the scope. I didn't know if there were logistical issues there, because it seemed, I mean, in a lot of our reviews, sometimes we just say, hey, you just don't touch that. We just did one.
I heard the question is, will you not interact with anybody that does work with scope? And I would say I couldn't do this job if I didn't interact with people that had it working now or working in the past or ever worked for scope, because scope has worked for every single contractor, almost every single contractor, every architect, every engineer in town. So if that was the case, I couldn't do the job. And so if that was the parameters with meeting this perception level, then I would definitely have to say there's zero chance of being able to not interact with people that may or may not be using scope, because I could assume right now that almost everybody in town has dealt with me at scope, whether it be financially or just answering questions or expert witness form or whatever it ends up being.
Okay. And by the way, I can really understand that now, why that came out the way it did.
Okay.
So it's sort of like past clients versus scope. But with respect to scope, if and this is probably oversimplistic at this point after all this discussion, but if it was you can't touch, and again, Terry's using official action, which is a term of art, you can't touch aspects of scope permitting, what would there be problems with that? But we're recommending.
I don't know what that could you
means
define
either.
that
Yeah,
a little
that's
bit more?
difficult there. Well, I mean, you've said already you are not going to be part of a decision-making process. But let's say it goes to an employee of Michelle. I mean, somehow I have no idea what that would mean. So an employee of Michelle is there. It's getting hung up on something. She's planning, so who knows what that could be. Would you ever then go talk to that employee? Or are you like, well, nope, that's scope, so I should stay away from it. Michelle can handle it. So I think there's a lot of like intermediary intervention because you're oversight to that whole department.
What they're doing and the decision level making for what scope does is almost very seldom to the level of the director or the level of the building official. Most of the time it has to do with all of the lower level supervisors, because it's just, can I get a CCO today? Can I get a footing foundation today? Those type of things are what happens in the permitting level. They're very simple. Hey, I need to get a footing foundation. Steve Ellis is supposed to say okay, but he's out of town. And so then they have to go, and sometimes because Steve's out of town, they go to Bob and say, Bob, I could get a F and F, but I can't because Steve's out of town, and he said I could. Can you give an F and F? And he initials off, and it goes. It's those type of simple decisions that are dealt with permit expediting. They're not like, oh, well, is this a Class A or Class B wetlands, and whether or not, I mean, it's just completely it's just at process type of things that permit expediting does that, and so I don't need to get involved. I mean, there never issues that would get involved because permit expediting is just a process, and so there really is no technical decisions there. But when you say that official business, anybody can turn in recommendations or complaints online with regard to processes, and they come in anonymous a lot of times. I don't know who those are, but if it has to do with, hey, can you as a process of the system, I mean, I try to take all of those and read them and say, oh, geez, if we can fix something, make it faster, then let's do that. So I don't know if I know my daughter used to put a lot of those in. We don't really get them except through the ethics, or not ethics, but the auditor. They do them quarterly now. And so he doesn't give us the names of those, But, I mean, I can probably assume, by the language or whatever, that it's somebody that knows more about permitting than another person. So, but it's like not a decision-making for a certain project, but it's for the process in general. So when you say that, it's like, I value everybody. She works with the home builders, so sometimes we're going to be in a home builder meeting that she's there talking home builder issues or whatever. I don't know. I don't think that's, that's not like project specific, decision making specific, but it kind of sounds like it falls in what you just asked me with regard to how we do business. But
And with respect to Bob, because you had said that building official, they can appeal that to the building board.
Building board, yeah.
So would you ever intervene between, let's say on a scope project, which is it, between Bob and the building board?
No, Bob is, as building official, is the governance or the secretary of the building board. So I don't.
Is he independent then of you? I mean, could you try to influence him, or he's independent? That position.
Well, as a supervisor, I mean, I guess if you really thought that's what, I mean, there's nothing probably stopping a supervisor. I think we talked a little bit about that. I think that, no, I don't try to influence them. I try to ask them, and I try to see what processes they think are moving forward, what codes need to be changed. But as per
and I don't know if there's something comparable with Michelle. I don't know if her stuff goes to P&Z or how.
It goes to, their appeals, if they're appeals, they go to the clerk's office, but there's all those entitlement actions that go through. But I mean, I haven't seen or dealt with one entitlement action on a decision. I mean, the planners handle those, and then the boards make the decision, and then there's an appeal process for that if they go to. I just don't see that much day-to-day technical. It's more moving things forward. I mean, it's just at a higher level. I mean, it's hard to explain, but yet I'm there. If they were to ask me for technical advice, I mean, I'd give them technical advice, but they haven't come to me for technical advice yet because they're very competent people.
So let me ask you with respect to the word facilitate, which you've used a bunch. So, and partly you had talked about status sort of update. So to you, facilitating would be you go to some employee in this, let's put it back into the permitting world, and you just ask for the status of the scope matter. So
I don't usually go to staff.
Okay.
I go to Bob and I go to Michelle. That's usually who I go to at the front counter, emailing in things. I mean, I look at processes that we changed, make sure those processes were being followed, and ask questions about that to the people that are located close to me. But I don't typically. I go to Bob and say, Bob, I got a call from a contractor. Can you go follow up on this? And then he gives me the feedback on it.
Because that brings in what Terry was talking about. Does that somehow influence, or because you're asking let's say a lower line person a status, and Terry, in your mind, asking that status, which is facilitating, would that be quote official action to you?
Asking about the status.
Yeah, so a lower line employee, something's happening, let's say permitting process, so it's not yet gone up to Bob Dole, but you get a hold of it, Ron gets a hold of it, he hears this and goes over to that lower level employee and says, what's the status of this? Because you would look at that as facilitation, right?
I just don't see that as really happening that way much.
What about like that pattern where like someone contractor calls because they're unhappy with the response they're getting from either staff in Bob's organization or staff in Michelle's organization?
It goes straight to Bob or Michelle.
Well, they say, and you think, this is totally unreasonable, which I have, so the sense that I've added up some of the decisions made in our meeting, and you think this is, like, what the heck, this is totally unreasonable, or like response that you're getting, this has to not be the process that we are following. And how is that, I think there, the subtle rub I see there is like, if that person is, the person still like handling their permit is scope, then how do you treat conveying the message to Bob or Michelle that, like, you
Well,
want to
one, I
convey
wouldn't
this
even
to
take
them
a complaint from
anyone who's
scope.
using- Well, not from scope,
So-
the person is using scope, but they're calling you directly. They're using scope to facilitate their permits, but they're calling you directly, not going through scope.
That's happened twice, and I gave them both to Bob or Michelle, whatever it was.
Would you know that that they're being represented by scope?
I've asked because it happened to be a company that I used to use, and so I kind of assumed it. I asked him, and so then I just gave it to Bob. I said, "Here, can you handle this and address it? It's a contractor call me, but it's on a scope project. I don't want it to be construed that I'm helping them out, but you know, you got to understand. I mean, Becky, you probably understand. Contractors will keep calling till they get an answer that they want, and so they keep, so they may have called scope, didn't get the right answer that they wanted, and then they call me because now I'm over, or they called staff, and whatever it ends up being, they just call everybody. They just keep calling until they get an answer. So, you know, if I've known and I know, I give it to Bob or I move it outside, and I make it well known that I'm not trying to make a decision on this. Bob, and the processes are, it's not unbelievably, when you really know it, it's not as complex as everybody makes it out to be. It's just, it's moving things forward, and like I've always told everybody, the answer to the technical issue is never usually the issue. The answer, the problem is how you communicate that comment or issue. That's what we're going at, trying to tell people you can say that negative thing that building safety does every day is tell everybody what they did wrong, right? I mean, you're in a negative environment every day, but you can do it in a kind way. I feel like I'm trying to create a kinder, gentler way of doing it, not changing the technical aspects. I never have changed the technical aspects for most people. Have I in the past, as building official? Yes, I signed change orders. Yes, I would make the final decision, but that's Bob now. There is no signing authority for anything with regard to permitting with my name on it. And I've never told anybody to sign something that they ever didn't want to sign themselves. So therefore, I don't feel like I'll ever put anybody in that position or ever be in that position, because that's just not what I do. That's why I feel I lasted as building official as long and has been rehired, because all of those things for that many years have been done that way, and I dealt with both. I mean, crisscross parties. Obviously, I started with Wirtz and went through Sullivan. So I mean, there's a lot of different mayors, and nobody as building official had lasted longer than maybe a year or two, and I was there for a long time. I really feel like, and people don't call me in the industry. I told them just as much no on the outside as I told them no on the inside. I mean, it's just, the code is the code, and it's very clear. If you pull something away from the code, you are going to get found. It will find you. You will lose, and you will and you will have a bad day when that happens. And so usually it's very easy. That's why I feel very strongly that this isn't that bad. It's very difficult to kind of convey that message to everybody that doesn't deal with that every day. And so, I mean, that's why I'm trying to do my best to explain all of those things, and at the same time respect that what and I do understand that it could be seen in a negative way, and that's what we're here for, to make sure that we can keep that to a minimum. And if we don't feel that it can be, then it is what it is. I mean, life is life, and we just move on. And so that's kind of me. That's me in general. I tried to be honest.
So, you know, one thing that occurs to me that might be helpful as we write this thinking is, if the mayor's office does come out sooner rather than later with some sort of like official written description of your position, that would be really helpful, right? Because it would be nice if part of the idea of this opinion is like a public document that says, we reviewed this situation and we think it's okay, but here's what's been put into place and here's how we're going to. It would be nice to be able to cite an official document that says, here is Mr. Thompson's position, and it's not a hands-on day-to-day reviewing permits kind of position, and that's going to take care. That alone is going to take care of a lot of the concerns about conflicts of interest. So, as it is, well, certainly if you don't ever get one, we'll just have to say, here's what was communicated to us, right? But it's certainly for a member of the public, it's more reassuring to say, it isn't what was communicated to us in an oral meeting. It's like, here's an official document that really lays out what the position is.
I would say that the org chart has been, everything in the organization has now been turned in and is in part of the budget process. Naming conventions, everything as of, Adam changed the final naming convention with regard to everything in community development yesterday. So OMB has it if you need that. I don't know who writes that up but OMB has the final latest org chart as described today with the name and the terminology and where my position would be. So they'd still probably have.
But let me interview
It
you.
would be like the amendment on the AO for
The Amy, municipal managers, had said first of the year, but they had to get it through the budget process.
Yeah.
Because they appropriate by department. But so Terry, your wish may not come true, but I think it's also helpful to the administration to say, here's some of our concerns. Don't make his position different. I mean, so they can sort of see where we're concerned. Can I ask 3 questions? And these are questions I had thought of a week or 2 ago, and some of them you've answered, maybe, and tell me when my words are too broad. Do you think it is acceptable for you to attend meetings concerning specific projects represented by scope?
Like,
I don't know. I mean, so it's what kind of meetings could there be with scope? If there's do you have
well, I would say
meetings, or is that the Bob Michelle has?
we had a project with Watterson that's doing a COVID center for counseling or whatever, and scope is part of submitting the permit, but all the decision making was done through. They were just trying to say what they're coming in with, and I had a meeting and just said, here, you need to go see him, you need to go see them, you need to go see them, here's the issues you got to do, thank you very much, goodbye. So there's no technical decision making, it's just processing and trying to streamline who they are going to deal with. I know Watterson uses scope. Aviator Hotel, Mark Begich is doing one through KPB. I don't think that they didn't know who they were using, but I did all the permitting and all the stuff for Mark Begich, so I'm sure that project's going to come through them. But we met on a pre-application meeting, just telling them what to do, what to expect, what needs to be submitted in the, and so those are facilitating a speedy documentation, so where they give us the right documentation to review so the reviewers can do their job correctly. I think that I don't see that as whether I do that before. I mean, at that point in time, scope hasn't done any work, but they're probably going to just dump that project into the permitting file. So I mean, I don't know. We did a Teams meeting with the Aviator. Scope wasn't in it, but I'm pretty sure they're probably permitted, but it has nothing to do with the decision.
I apologize. I just want to suggest we move on relatively soon because we have the 3 o'clock here and we still haven't gone back into deliberative session on 2 other things.
And can I suggest, I have a couple more questions, but I thought also what would be helpful is, to me it's pretty clear, we're going to say it's a manageable conflict, but we're going to try to set up some parameters. And I'd almost like to invite Bob back and say, what about these parameters? Number 1, do they make sense? Number 2, can you live with them? Because this isn't our area of subject matter expertise. And then we had a few questions at the beginning, we could do do that. We normally don't give our opinions out ahead of time, but this is a new enough area that I think it'd be worthwhile, plus that would give me my opportunity to ask a few more questions. And so that would be my suggestion. Oh, you're the chair, not you. He took over last week, so it was a coup. I know, I keep doing that too.
There's a soft coup. We invite them back.
But that would be my suggestion, in that it would, unless someone has an objection, why not let Ron know what the board is thinking ahead of time, if it can be based on sort of misunderstandings, or because it is a pretty broad area.
That's fine. I think that.
Are you comfortable waiting a month? I mean, that's the request, but I think that's fine.
Well, until they do an org chart, he doesn't have to go to the assembly, so.
Can I make a before we send you off on your way? One other area that would be relevant for the code here is the use of confidential city information. So it sounds like you can imagine you were not to share that with your the scope, right? So confidential information. There's not much we can really do to firewall that, except just make you aware you shouldn't do that. Just be careful about information as it gets shared. And then the other thing is not to get into your kids' business and the like, but you may want we might want to suggest them to clean up their website a little bit, in the sense that you are promoting photos and the like. And eventually, if you get deep enough in, there's a prominent photo of you, and at the end of the paragraph about you, it says you've moved on and you're no longer with the company. But it very much looks like I think of it.
I haven't looked at it since years ago when we first
you might want
started.
to ask them just to
Oh, the golf tournament.
To edit it a little bit, because you can certainly imagine if you were coming up for a confirmation hearing, people are going to walk in with that photo.
Yeah.
Like, look, in reality, de facto,
Right.
Scope still sees him as
Yeah.
executive of the company.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah, no
I would
problem.
recommend
Yeah.
I think Aisha was trying to say something.
Oh, Aisha, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say one other thing. I don't want to extend this, and I almost hate to bring it up, but because we've talked so much about the you can't take this official action in terms of decisions on projects that that Scope would be involved in. There is the aspect too of if you are doing some sort of higher level, I guess we'd say, changing a process or a procedure. If you're involved, I think, and the rest of the board can correct me if I'm wrong, if you're involved in changing that process and in the deliberation and decisions about what that process is going to look like in a way that for some reason directly benefits Scope and no one else, and there's some guidelines in the code about how this might happen. But I just want to throw out there that I think our opinion will probably say something about that too, that official action can be a higher level process action. And I'm struggling to think of the exact situation in which that would happen right now. I suppose if you did something in your position where you made the process incredibly more complicated, thereby giving Scope and your children more business to, shepherd people through this new complicated process that you've devised, that doesn't sound like that's going to be the reality. But I think that something like that will probably be in our opinion. And so I just want to throw that out, that I think there are situations that there could be a conflict of interest other than you making a particular decision, or in this case, screening yourself from a decision on work that Scope is directly involved in.
Can I answer that? Because I think this is one of the areas that does maybe need a little bit more discussion, is that, in fact, last night at the assembly meeting, there's titles 21, 23, and I'm sure that Ron did most of the streamlining type stuff, and the assembly sent it back to building board and P&Z, planning and zoning, for further input, which is entirely appropriate. So I think there's other levels of review, but it's something to at least look at. So, Ron as director, of course they're ones who want all sorts of things. I thought it was interesting when Ron said, hey, it impacts everybody, not just his group. I mean, to the extent he's lower fees, to the extent he's eliminated some steps, but probably the control there is that it's going to go through quite a bit of additional public process and take weeks and weeks and weeks. So something to keep in mind. I think Becky's been involved in some of that stuff, so she could have some input. But Aisha, I'm just saying that there is quite a bit of additional process involved there. But I can see addressing it, but I think that that's one of the ones where there is really quite a bit of additional public process. Directors can advocate for whatever they want, but then they gotta get it through both the administration and the assembly.
And the boards and commission, yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, should we wrap this up for today then? And I ask Mr. Thompson to come back after we've drawn up some ideas and an outline and everything, and then we can write a budget and see if that makes practical sense,
Okay.
given his expertise in that area. Okay. Sounds good. Well, thank
Okay.
you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Sorry we took a lot
Nice
of
to
your
meet you.
time.
Oh, no
Appreciate it.
worries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, thanks.
They keep looking at you, it's terrible.
It's the lights coming in from over here.
Maybe it's a position, maybe we need to.
That might be true,
Yeah,
too.
it is.
Yeah, sure, you want to switch seats?
What's that?
You want to switch seats?
Why's that?
Because Dee keeps looking
I
over
keep
me. to do
looking
this.
at him.
It's probably the assembly usually.
That's true.
It's probably for the best that she looks to you.
And command presence.
All right.
Well, so Terry, we probably should come out of this for a few minutes. Do you think, Jennifer? Or
Well, you're
everything-
still in open
Yeah, we're-
session.
Oh, an open, okay.
Yeah, everything has been recorded in open session,
Okay.
so.
Should we just move on to the next agenda?
We'll be after, but maybe go into a brief deliberative session to discuss before we.
Yeah.
Brief deliberative session, is that the idea?
Well, I
No,
was gonna say
it's
after
the-
we completed this, I've written in some respect for time.
Should we move on to request for advisory opinion 2021 -09?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's move on to that one.
How you doing? Good to see you again.
How are you?
Good,
Well,
thanks.
my agenda, so
I do.
let's see what we can have here. Oh, here we go.
It would be the very next page.
Mr. Zapet?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you so much for coming. I'm Terry Kelly, I'm chairperson of the Board of Ethics.
I'm Becky with Pearson, member of the board of ethics.
And Jack McKenna, I'm also one of the
Nice to
board
meet you.
members. Hi.
Nice to meet you.
We have one person on the phone.
Hi, I'm Misha Pallison, also a member of the board.
Oh, I'm Dan. Thanks.
And Dan, you've met the two of us before, attorneys for the board.
Yes, I have.
All right, very good. Do you have an introduction to the situation?
Yeah, if I
here, or-
could. Dan, this is a little bit different than we normally do. A lot of times I'll file as a municipal attorney or the municipal ethics officer a request for advisory opinion on your behalf. That just means it's easier for me to type it up than it is for you. But in this case, I thought for both yourself and the person before, this is really a matter of public interest. It hit the newspapers, and that it was important that it came out at this board meeting, a check of conflicts, any recommended parameters to that. This is not intended to defame character or any of that stuff where we want to go into deliberative. This is pure, what's your business interests, what are the potential conflicts, what do we recommend? So it's low key in terms of colorful. And so this will be a published opinion at some point. So everything you say will be part of public record. This is very common, however. So for instance, Michelle McNulty, who's a planning director, she came here a year ago because she came from Dow, and Dow does all sorts of planning things.
Yes.
And Christina Hendrickson, another new appointee, has property in Birdwood and is involved in a number of planning decisions. So she came here. So this is not uncommon. It's very routine. I thought it was helpful because after both Lisa and I met with you briefly, by the way, for the board, the municipal manager, Amy Dabowski, asked Lisa and I to meet with Dan briefly, and we met with you about an hour, and see, did you see any basically showstoppers? Is there a reason? We went through some initial stuff, but this deserves, because it's going to be in the public eye, this board weighed in on this. So that's why you're here, because it's important enough. I personally think the assembly probably would have held up confirmation and say, we want you to go to the ethics board. So that's why you're here. And by the way, we're under sort of both the assembly and the mayor, pretty independent. The board does what they think is right. They're an advisory group in this capacity. They're just saying, hey, our recommendation is we think you have some conflicts here. This is what we recommend. I don't think we've ever said that you have an absolutely unmanageable conflict. You need to go find another job. So it's trying to be helpful. So that's the context here, even though I filed it. Okay? So I don't know if Terry, who wants to take control?
Lisa?
Sure, I think what you provided for us was really helpful, and I don't know if everyone's had a chance to take a look at it. But I thought maybe what you could do is just start by talking with us a little bit about what you wrote up, Dan. In my mind, when we talked to you, I think you talked about a couple of outside business interests that you have. You have the trucking company, right?
Yes.
And then Denali Disposal, which is an interest that it looks like you gave to your daughter, correct? Or you have relinquished your interest in that business.
Okay, well, on the first issue right there,
Yeah.
I didn't relinquish anything to her. She actually started the business.
She started it.
She started the business. She chased all the business assets down to start it. Myself and my wife are just added on.
Okay.
I think I told you that to
Yeah.
12.5% because she's a single mom, and I think we got mostly on there to just, if something ever happened to her, to take it over and get it to her kids. But I don't have any interest in the business. I've never made any business decisions for her. Of course, I consulted her. She's my daughter, like anybody would.
Yeah.
And I helped her out when she needed consulting or something that needed to be figured out.
Lisa, can I interrupt now?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Can you tell if for the board what SWS does, and then because we're in a contract,
can.
what does Denali
Disposal, yeah, okay.
So-
Anyway, Solid Waste Services is the entity that does all the waste service for a certain part of Anchorage. They have their own district or borders that they stay in. And then the private haulers can haul the trash that's outside of their service area. So my position as Solid Waste Services, I don't think has anything I could do to help any private hauler out because we're in different areas of the city. And what I told Dee was that there's no decisions I can make, even if I was I like she said, I relinquished my 12.5% back to the company, but I don't think there's any decisions that a solid waste service director could make to help any private hauler out. And it looks, like I told Dee, I've had 2 different waste companies. That's where I got my experience in this. That's why I'm a good fit for this job. And I don't think there's any conflict that it could come up where I could help an individual out like that.
Dan, how much of, just out of curiosity, what is the percentage of business within municipal boundaries that the private folks do versus the union?
Solid waste has 20% of 20% of Anchorage, and then the private haulers outside of that have the other 80%.
And I think you told us that isn't Denali Disposal one of like 3 or something like that?
One of 4 or 5.
4 or 5.
Yeah. Yes. The ones I can think of is Alaska Waste, Blue Arctic, Northern Waste, Denali, and Burt Ramsey.
Yeah.
Ramsey.
Then I think another thing that we talked about with you, we talked about the possibility that there might be some discussions that could arise about revising boundaries. And I think you said that would be very difficult for you to imagine that that's something that solid waste would take on.
The reason I say that is because solid waste, the mayor and the administration could try to do that, but everything has to go through the assembly if it's ever done.
Yeah.
So it's a long road to hoe if that's something that they're planning on doing, which I haven't had any discussions about that, but it's got to be have to go through all unions and the assembly.
Are there matters of the RCA in which SWS and private haulers are not generally aligned, or where their interests would potentially be in conflict?
No, the solid waste service is not regulated. All the other trash companies are.
Got it.
And they can't. The boundaries of the solid waste, you can't go in their boundaries at all. And so I don't think there's a conflict there. And the RCA doesn't oversee solid waste.
Okay, so SWS, I was trying to remember, so I was formerly the municipal attorney, so I was trying to pick my brain. Did SWS ever engage in regulatory counsel to participate in any kind of RCA matters at all, or does it stay out of the RCA completely?
I think as of 10 years ago, they deregulated stuff. I don't think they have any
Okay,
concerns with RCA now.
got it.
This might sound like a really stupid question, but Are there any, or have you had any discussions with people about the whole notion of potentially privatizing that, like remaining 20% or?
No, ma'am.
or not?
No.
Yeah.
I know Waste Connections was here, and I just learned of this last week, that they had negotiated, or one of the other directors at Solid Waste, and I don't know who it was, but they had been in communication with some large firm to sell a portion of it off, and that's all I know about it. If you're asking me if it could be privatized, or it could be, yes. Yeah, I've seen big companies in other states cities be sold to private haulers, or split up into quadrants. They get a portion to different companies.
Are we kind of unique for cities?
We are unique. There's a few in Arizona and California. There's places just like this. Yeah.
So why are we unique?
Oh, just because you have a certain area where solid waste can go, and the private haulers can't. That's what's unique.
Is that a relic of the borough combination too, the same way that Mount Service Territory is?
Is there anything about access to the municipal transfer station that you could change for them?
No, there isn't. No, they have access just like everyone else already. Yeah.
Is that governed by code or by contract?
What's that?
Is that governed by code or by contract?
No, I think it's by code.
By code.
Yeah.
There.
Because that's the only two places in Anchorage you can dump, even as a private hauler, is at solid waste. It's either at Eagle River, at ARL, or the CTS here in town. But everybody has the same excess there. And while we're on that subject there, I put a little paragraph at the bottom. Solid Waste Services doesn't provide a roll-off service, which is the big boxes that go back on the trucks that roll on and off for construction and demo debris. And when people call for roll-off service, you have to get an exemption from Solid Waste Services to go into their boundaries, and they keep track of when you take the can in, when you take the can out, but there's no monetary exchange, and it's just a phone call to Solid Waste, to the customer service. You tell them where you're going to be putting the can down and how long it's going to be there.
And those are always branded. It's like a notice thing.
It's just a notice,
Okay.
yeah. Any company can call the city, because they don't provide the roll-off service right now. They just do the front load and residential cans.
But there's no decision making of yes
No.
or no. It's just a.
It's a formality, yes.
Not a lot of no discretion really.
Yeah.
Anybody
can do it.
make the phone call and, okay.
What happened to Alaska Waste? You said it was sold in 2009?
I think Alaska Pacific Environmental bought it from me, and they later purchased Waste Management also. So it was just a sale.
And you don't have a residual interest?
No, ma'am. No.
Dan, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about your trucking business and whether or not there might be any type of municipal contracts or anything like that they might be involved in.
That I've worked for the city before. I've had the city snow haul twice, and then I haven't bid on any city contracts for gravel or aggregate hauling for probably at least 4 or 5 years. And the reason I haven't is because the company that I contract to, Anchorage Sand and Gravel, they bid on the jobs, then I do the trucking for them.
They make the bid.
They make the bid.
And
They
then
pay me when I'm done
sub
for
it
the
out to you.
services. Yes. And that's basically what my trucking company does.
And did those contracts go through PM&E or which subsection of the city?
Most of the contracts I think are for sand and aggregate, and they go through street maintenance mostly. Yeah.
Okay.
Merrifield.
And you've just been working with sand and gravel for a long time.
Yes, I've been doing that since 1979.
What about the snow haul? You said you used to do the snow haul, but not anymore.
I bid on the city contract for the snow haul 4 years ago, and I didn't get it back. I lost the bid.
And you wouldn't be bidding on it again, I imagine.
No, not while I'm in this position.
Yeah,
No,
got it.
no.
And are you 100% owner of the last
I'm
company?
100% owner, yes, ma'am. My kids actually are operating it right now.
Anything else you can think of that would, where the trucking business might intersect with municipal business?
No, I don't think so. At solid waste, no. I don't think solid waste ever uses any kind of
Yeah.
business that I would be in.
The newspapers made the biggest issue with the privatizing, and I don't know what you don't have any time right now, but what are some of the issues there? I don't know anything about that issue, but that seemed to be the forefront of the press coverage.
I think what they're worried about is that I'm going to privatize, so
Yeah.
my daughter's company would have a shot at taking over some of the privatization, I think.
Right.
And like I was telling you earlier, that would for one guy to do that from a position like mine would be fairly hard to do. Yeah, I don't think it could be done.
And are your employees union employees for the most part? SWS
SWS has 4 different unions, yes, ma'am. Teamsters, IBW, operators, and the AMEA.
Just for the group, that would make it very difficult.
That would make it very difficult.
It's really difficult.
Yeah, because they all have different agreements. Yeah, I've read through them
Good
there.
luck with that.
I think it's hard to get rid of one person, no less a whole division of the city.
What percentage of the non-disclosure does your wife currently own?
20. I think I gave mine to her. I rolled mine over to her, so 25%.
She has 25%.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I could get back. That might not be true, but I think that's the way that they set it up.
I don't think the exact number is critical. I'm just harkening back to something Terry mentioned in our last conversation, which is the fact that you've divested directly is certainly a step is a good division in terms of setting the boundary between the business and your current role. But nonetheless, the code still would define you as having a substantial financial or private interest in the company, and now that they have for the municipality, given that your wife, with whom you legally share assets, holds 25% ownership of the company. Not to mention that the connection to your daughter as well. So I think that would come into the rubber opinion we should produce out of this. And it's not, as Steve mentioned, I think an unmanageable conflict, but just maybe mindful of in terms of how the code treats a substantial financial or private interest.
Which it doesn't sound like you're envisioning this happen, but that's why, even though you don't own the company anymore, any official action that you might take that would involve the interests of the company, the code's going to interpret you as having a financial interest in the company, even though it's your wife who actually has the ownership stake. And so that's why it's important to try to ferret out, is there a possible way in which you would be making decisions or participating in the decision process, even orally, that would impact the financial interests of that company? Because the code will continue to link you with that company.
And that's what I was saying earlier. I don't think there's anything that I could do to financially benefit any private hauler, them included.
I just want to make it quick, too. Even though we're saying that, I think it's still the better practice to divest. I mean, it's best for the appearance, and that's certainly something that the code recognizes, that while the appearance may not be a violation, it still matters. And so it's not us saying you shouldn't have done that, but it's more just saying we still have to go through the analysis. So that's, I think,
Well, and I think that's, the code still, even in the conflict of interest section, talks about public trust, and I think there is a point where the appearance can be so bad.
Oh, I agree with you.
That it gets violated.
Yeah, if I was on the outside looking in, I'd be concerned also.
Yeah, I think you absolutely did the right thing by divesting. I just want to caution at the same time, the code will still continue to link you to the company, but that's not fatal in and of itself. People can, we've ruled numerous times in the past, people can be executives with the city and have some, it's in the real world, right? It's a small town. People can have links back to industry. The key will be, are you taking official actions, which means that you're making discretionary decisions, or you're a part of the decision-making process that's going to have an impact specifically on that company, right? Either
that's
a contract they're putting forward, or some sort of regulation that's going to be changed that will be favorable uniquely to them. I'm not even sure the privatization stuff is a problem. I have to think about it, but even if you were a part of that discussion, I have to think about it, but that would be affecting all the haulers in town, right? I mean, so that would be a kind of wide class.
Yeah, I think it would be a very defensive flavor of the conversation. If there is something about the way that it was structured that one hauler to the disadvantage of others, or if it were the actual
the other ones where, you've got this initial decision on privatization, which might be favorable to your company, the company you have a relationship with, but numerous other companies. There's that decision, do we privatize? Then there would be another decision of, and then how do we set up the procurement process? And that's where it would get really dicey right now. Like that's where you really best not be part of those.
But that seems pretty speculative, given that.
Well, it's too,
Given the hurdles to
Yeah.
privatizing a municipal department, I think we're all cognizant of.
Yeah, I kind of want to keep my job.
Well, and as I heard from our previous, Mr. Thompson, it's like, and obviously you don't want to cause unnecessary public headaches for the mayor, right? I mean,
Right,
the media's
exactly.
already on top of this, the media's already kind of like, almost asserting that, right? And everything, and so we kind of want to keep things on the up and up, be transparent, be clear. Because after all, we don't want the mayor having, being hindered by.
Yeah, that's the
things
last
that
thing I
appear
want,
to the
yeah.
public to be,
Yeah.
unethical. So, any other questions? Anyone have any-
That's why I'm here.
And when again, I appreciate. I'm going to say to you too. I really appreciate you working with Dee and Lisa and Kelly and spending your time with us today. Because again, I being proactive and being transparent is probably the best way to deal with these situations.
When I went to see Dee and Lisa, I was hoping that they would further this on, because this will help a lot in moving forward one way or the other. So, yeah.
Well, we see this all the time. That you get stuff that on first glance looks like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. It's complete conflict. It's totally unethical. And then we've had these millions of cases like this where then you sift down, you start looking at the details, and you're like, oh, actually, once you get beyond that superficial examination, you see it's not as it's not very problematic. And we'll make some recommendations, about how to, firewall.
Yeah, if there's anything more I can do, I'm
So,
open for suggestions for sure.
thank you for.
Have you heard anything else, Dan? Just any employees or any other scuttlebutt about, grossing, any particular thing that you think we should know about?
No, just the being closely tied to Denali disposal. I didn't, to take this job, which I didn't want that to hinder anything for the mayor or myself,
Right.
or Bernadette. That's about it.
It's helpful.
I don't know if there's any more actions I can take to help.
Yeah.
Divest from that, or that's something we'll look at down the road if we have to.
Any other questions?
Aisha, do you have anything on the phone? It's hard to jump in.
I don't. I think you guys have covered the questions that I had. Thank you for the time.
Yeah, thank you too. I appreciate you. I know you guys could be somewhere else right now doing something more fun.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Terry.
Seems quite as fun as
Brilliant.
Terry.
Well, I guess Terry's having fun.
We're all having
Well, that's. Yeah, I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything. So.
Do you guys have a sense of what our next step would be on this request?
I think the business.
Yeah.
Okay, well, why
Yeah.
don't, if you can, let's deliberate.
I agree. Yeah, and I think after this one's much. It seems to be much clearer about
You were here for 20 minutes, Ron was here for an hour and a half.
Yeah. Well, Ron deserves it. I've had to get permits from that guy before. It wasn't fun. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Yep. And I hope I don't see you again.
I know.
No kidding. Thank you.
Bye.
Jerry, do we want to go?
I think, do we have a motion to move to deliberative session to discuss these?
Yeah, I don't think that's much. I have a deliberative session to discuss both requests for advisory opinion 2021-8 and 2021-9.
I'll second.
Any objections? Hearing no objections, Madam Clerk, let's move to deliberative session, please.
And that this is not an unmanageable conflict, provided that very specific instructions are followed with respect to official action taken with regard to permittees represented by scope permitting, and that we include in that opinion several fact patterns to help make clear what that Lisa take on an advisory opinion with respect to 2021-9 in accordance with the discussion completed in deliberative session.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Abstain?
Are you sure? Have we lost
Still
you?
there?
I was agreeing on mute.
No, I just did. Okay, very good. That passes then. So.
And then I would move that we go back into deliberative session to conclude our discussion of our draft opinions in 2021-6 and 2021-7.
Second.
Second. Any objections? Hearing no objections, let's please move.
All right, we're back recording. I'll make a motion that Chair Kelly will make edits to the draft opinion for 2021-6, request for an advisory opinion in line with the comments that we had, and board member Wayne Pearson will make edits consistent with our discussion to the opinion for request for an advisory opinion 2021-7, and then that can be issued after formatting with attorney edits.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Aye.
The motion passes. Very good.
Motion to adjourn?
Oh! This meeting is adjourned.